All right, now we're recording.
Awesome.
Yeah, now we're like in it and stuff. Eventually, I'm gonna get like another microphone and like
2-for-1 deal.
yeah, like another microphone. Put like a table.
There's one here. Just a microphone.
Yeah, but that one it's like this one, another one of these. That one doesn't even work.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, it would if you plugged it in, I guess. But yeah, I get like a long table and like one of these on like each side with headphones and stuff for like both people. Because
When
like
I come back,
now,
I can have my own microphone.
right?
Sweet.
Because now like I can hear you, like through these, and like I can hear what's going on, but you can't. You have no idea.
It's a secret.
It's a secret.
Work for the government.
You'll never know what's being said in this room because you don't have headphones to hear what's
That's
being
right.
said into the microphone.
I think you're working for the government.
Yeah, the like the Amazon Alexa, working for the CIA
Yeah.
or the FBI, whatever it is. But yeah, so this is I guess episode 2 and a very quick first special edition of the Vaughn Show, interviewing the Vaughn. David Vaughn, my dad. Here he is.
Good morning.
There he is. Yeah, special edition. I mean, it's Father's Day today, the day we're recording. It's Monday when the people are listening, or Tuesday. I don't know when they listen. It'll go live on Monday. And so, yeah, just wanted to have you on the podcast on Father's Day and just kind of talk about.
So how does it go live whenever it's tomorrow and we're doing it now?
Like we put it, well, it's live. What's it? Live to recording.
Oh.
Live to recording.
Okay.
So like minimal editing and stuff like that. We'll just take out like the
Gotcha.
stuff at the beginning when we were like testing. But other than that, it's live to recording. It'll go up on Monday at like
Okay.
8:30, something. It depends on if I get it done. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be fine. Yeah, have you on the show and talk about Father's Day stuff, about like, you know, parenting and how awful Reilly and I both were and stuff like that.
Oh, I get to tell stories.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's story time. Story time with
Hey.
Dad. That's the title of the episode. Story time with Dad.
Yeah.
And so, for those of you who don't know, like, Dad is a detective. He's a cop, and has been for what?
18 years.
18 years, like on the force, on the Delta Farce.
Yeah.
And so you started as a beat cop, right? Or in the jail.
Yeah. Started in the jail. Worked there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Did some different things in the jail. Did some training for the guys in the jail. Helped write their first training program.
Is that before or after you almost shot me with a taser?
That was during. About the same time. You know, some late nights training third shift gets the better of you sometimes.
Yeah.
Took Spencer along for a class one night for some taser training about midnight, and he always sat in the same chair across the room basically from where I was teaching at, and playing with the taser, I guess showing him what not to be doing, and inadvertently fired it into that chair. Luckily he had gotten up and moved probably minutes before that happened, so
But it's
he didn't
fine.
get the 50,000 volts.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know how old I was then, but I'm sure I would have been fine either way.
Oh
I
yeah,
probably would have had some cool hair or something.
I might not have been so fine.
Probably not, but it works out. It's fine. And so, I mean, most of you guys know, I think I mentioned it in the last couple, but I went to school at Westside. That's where I graduated from. And Dad, like, transitioned from that into, like, being a patrol guy on third shift and all that stuff. And then we're SRO for a while.
Yeah, I worked patrol for a few years, worked night shift where everybody starts, and kind of get your your eyes open to what happens around this area, you know, in the middle of the night that people normally don't see. And, you know, honestly, we don't talk about a lot. So put some years in there, and then I went to, I got enough time in to work day shift for a while, and still, worked every weekend still done some teaching and different areas for the jail and for some of our deputies as well.
Yeah.
Got the opportunity to go be the SRO at Westside, and when that came open, you and Reilly both went to school there.
Yeah.
Basically could get to see you guys every day and maybe make a little bit of a difference in a lot of young people's lives that way. So jumped on that, went out there. I guess I was there for 5 or 6 years until you graduated.
I don't remember when you came. Like, how old was I or what grade I was in? I think I was in high school already.
You had moved to high school already. I went to the middle school building. You were already in the high school building, so
at least like 8th grade.
Well, Reilly was in 4th grade my first year there, because she was my first class that I did some teaching there, through Better Chances, or Smart Choices, Better Chances, and then she was my first class with that program.
So I had to have been in 10th grade then. I was already a sophomore then.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was in 4th grade. What's Better Chances? What's that?
This is a program through the Arkansas Attorney General's office. It's kind of came about from the DARE program, and it's just all about rules and laws, trying to introduce kids to the law enforcement system. Because they're about that age in the 4th grade. They're coming into the age where they can actually be taken to jail for some things. In Arkansas, you can go to juvenile jail at 10 years old. So we try to introduce them to the laws and explain it to them in a way that a 4th grade or 10-year-old mind can understand it, by introducing them through the rules they have at home, and letting them know that you always have a choice, but with that choice there's always also a consequence. So and then bringing that in from the rules at home, the rules at school, and then carry it on into the laws of the state of Arkansas and the laws of the city of Jonesboro and surrounding cities, because there's different nuances in city laws or ordinances and state laws. So try to explain as much of that in as simple a way as you can, really.
Yeah. And I mean, you've been in some kind of in that kind of thing, like training stuff, since you started, really, for as long as I can remember. You've been in some kind of it, either like training at the jail or like putting together programs for like school preparedness, or like all and everything in between. Like, why is that something that you wanted to do when you went in? Because you used to work construction before. Yeah,
it was it was on my mind when I got to work. Finally got into law enforcement and worked in the jail, and started helped start their training program, and kind of jump started it with some programs that a good friend of mine, Billy Calderon, now a state trooper, and I kind of worked together on some stuff and brought the Taser in. Billy and I went to Shreveport, Louisiana, and did some research and some training on Taser to bring that in.
Like, you actually brought the equipment to Craighead County?
Yeah, we ordered the equipment, and we went down there to get trained on it. So we were some of the first first law enforcement people in this county that were actually trained to use that device, and kind of spread it through the county and taught our guys how to use it. And then, of course, when I moved into SRO, we had a former deputy that is the director of security there at Westside, and he and I were going to a conference in Little Rock, and we were talking about school safety and what would happen, in an active shooter situation, because that's always on our mind as law enforcement, especially being involved with Westside, which Ryan had just graduated when all that happened in '98.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the way people were trained, the way kids were trained and teachers were trained to just kind of hide in a corner, and let things happen. And we were just headed to Little Rock, and I'm like, well, I can tell you 2 kids in your school that aren't going to just stand in the corner, because they've been taught to get out if they can and run and get away. And we got about 10 miles down the road, and he just looked at me. He said, why why are we not teaching all of our kids this stuff?
Yeah.
So we got to do some research on different programs out there, and we got trained in the Alice program. So I went to several different schools around the state and taught the Alice program while I was still at Westside. Of course, when I made the move over to the criminal division, I was more in the learning mode than teaching from there out, and
Right.
there was so much to learn and so much. We stayed so busy, I just didn't have time to travel and do any of that. Or I went back to Westside a few times for some things, and I still try to go back to Westside about once a year, just for a career day, either in the middle school or the high school.
Yeah. Yeah, we were both there the last time they did that.
Yeah,
I think,
that's
yeah.
pretty
in
cool.
different parts of the building, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, with something that you've got going on that I wish more young people would be involved with is giving back to your school and giving back to your community that way.
Yeah. Well, and whenever like you were in school, like when you were in high school and things like that, was that something that was common, like back in the 80s, late 80s or so, like people who graduated? You went to school at Brooklyn, like at alumni giving back to the school more regularly or more often, not necessarily monetarily, but like time or whatever.
Not really. We didn't have the programs available now, and we didn't bring people in like they do that I can recall. I went to Brooklyn School in the 80s when it was just a different culture and a different time. I don't know. We had my group's focus was on athletics, and so that's that's where I was for most of my high school days, was in the gym playing basketball, or tried to stay involved with the school through, was the student council and the FFA and the different organizations. But it was just so different then. We were a school of maybe 700 or 800 kids, K through 12.
Yeah.
In fact, when I moved here, when I started school at Brooklyn, they didn't even have kindergarten. It was first grade through 12th grade. So
that's why I tell everybody that you failed kindergarten, but like you never went. Yeah, and like that. It's funny because like I went through, like I wasn't an FFA, but all the other clubs, like I did everything else except for athletics and like FFA that we had, and like student council is a big thing, like that like flows in our family pretty well, like from like your dad down. And I think that's really cool. Yeah,
with my dad is a Brooklyn alum too, and he went his whole life at Brooklyn, and he ended up serving on the school board for many years while we were in school there at Brooklyn. I think he retired the year that I graduated, so he was at every graduation for all of us. There were 4 of us, and he was at every high school graduation as a board member for all of us, and put a lot of work in.
Right.
Made some hard decisions, some very unpopular decisions back in those days. He had to shut one district down to benefit another district, basically. So, but that's what he had to do.
Yeah, and it's cool, like, because I didn't get to know him. Yeah. Like he died when I was really young, before I was born. Maybe. Yeah, right before I was born.
He died in 90, so 1990.
Yeah, 1990, and I was born in 97. And so like I hear a lot of those stories and things like that, and it's just it's kind of cool to just kind of watch the like he did all of this stuff, and then you did all of this stuff that kind of aligns, and Uncle Brad and Uncle Rodney and Aunt Lisa all kind of did those things too. Yeah. And it's not
Absolutely.
And it's not even, it never has been for me like an intentional like, and I'm assuming it wasn't for you guys, like this is what Dad did, this is what I'm gonna do. It wasn't like that's how it's gonna be. It just happens to
this comes, and it's just something that you just kind of, I don't know, just fall into, into what your likes and dislikes are. And we all of us kids were into athletics pretty heavily.
Yeah.
But
which is funny because Courtney, Aunt Lisa's oldest daughter, is fairly athletic.
Yeah.
And Matthew and Caroline's still more of an academic, but the rest of us are not at all. Yeah. Like I can't. I can follow athletics, but I'm the least athletic person.
But we didn't have the other programs.
Yeah.
That you guys get. Like when I went to school at Brooklyn, we didn't have band. We didn't have choir.
Yeah.
And things like that. We didn't have. We had a form of the gifted and talented program, but not nearly the same as it is now. We didn't have East Lab, and a lot of schools now have like a radio program or
some kind of broadcast or something.
Audio visual. We didn't have. We had a very small drama department. Nothing like they have now.
Yeah.
Which Brooklyn, by the way, has exploded since I went to school.
Yeah. Well, they're at what are they at K-12 now? Any idea? Over the last couple years, it's been
they're
crazy.
Their fourth grade class this year had about 200 kids in it.
Yeah, that's wild.
So,
and Brooklyn and Westside have been very similar in size the past decade.
Westside was way. They were a class ahead of Brooklyn in size when I was in school.
Yeah.
And so, Brooklyn didn't even have a football team until about 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a band, of course. Didn't have a marching band until then. So all those were not even options for us.
Yeah.
And of course back then we used some of us still use manual typewriters. And back when I was there, we did have some electric and some manual.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I told the story when I was talking with Cody on the first episode about how like you in school like coded that game in COBOL.
Yeah.
And
senior year.
Yeah.
That was just a. They kind of made computer classes started at Brooklyn when I was maybe sophomore.
Yeah.
And it was so basic.
Yeah.
It was our first computer you had to load with a cassette tape. So 20 minutes of the period were spent loading the program so you could work on it. And then junior year, we got to study a little bit more, and we studied some basic language and had a great geek teacher that ended up being, and you actually met him at Quiz Bowl one year. He's passed on now, but Mr. Reilly was a judge at Quiz Bowl.
Yeah, I remember meeting him.
Smartest man I've ever met. I mean, he could write programs in binary code. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
So had one class with him, and then the next year. They didn't really have an advanced class for it, a curriculum, but they wanted us to get some more exposure to computers, so they put, 4 or 5 of us in an advanced computer class.
Yeah.
And our whole thing we were going to be graded on was we needed to come up with a video game.
Yeah.
So we just kind of screwed off the whole year, basically, and put one together in the last minute. And it was... It worked, so it got us all through it. But,
you got the grade.
It was just a little stick man that shot another little stick man.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, it worked.
Probably almost as equal to Pong.
Yeah.
It was,
hey, Pong was huge.
Yeah.
Pong was huge.
Started with Pong.
Yeah. And so you didn't have nearly the programs that it was the 80s. It was the late 80s.
It was Brooklyn in the 80s was basketball. And we had an old airplane hangar for a gym that they moved in from over in the Eastern District somewhere.
That's true, like an actual airplane.
And it had we called it asbestos. It wasn't actually asbestos insulation, but because there was no drop down ceiling in it, it was all the way up to the basically the tin on the top, and had that sprayed in insulation that would fall on you when you were playing.
It's mildly distracting.
But the place would be packed to the rafters every Tuesday and Friday night for the senior high basketball teams. We never were state champions. We did go compete a few times at the state level, but it was just exciting for the whole community came out. It wasn't just the basketball parents. It was the whole community came out to support the team. So pretty cool.
Yeah, and Brooklyn. Has grown so much. Westside's always had at least since I've been going there, a very competitive basketball team specifically. We've had some European League players come through, like Hunter Mickelson and his crew, his squad, won a ring or two.
We won a state championship and runner-up the next year.
Yeah. And so you kind of saw the same thing there. It's the small, even in 2019, it's a Westside is a small town community school almost with just a lot more resources than what you would normally think of as a small town community school. And so like we've got like an Amazon grant, and we've got for things like engineering and stuff like that, an East Lab, a FFA program that is through the roof and things like that. And so
Westside was growing in the 80s and early 90s, and probably at close to the level that Brooklyn eventually took off at. But when that one day in '98 happened, it just stopped.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no growth in Westside for a long time after that. And now it's back to growing now.
Yeah.
It's back to, because when I first started SRO, even I would go to a class somewhere, and we would all, first thing you do is talk about, who you are, where you're from, what department you're at, and if it was a school class, what school you worked at.
Yeah. And you were always the West Side
and
guy.
As soon as it came out of my mouth, everybody would just kind of stop and look, and then everybody wants to talk to you afterwards.
Yeah.
Even though I was so far removed from that, that happened before I even started in law enforcement. I did do a lot of studying on it, while I was out there, but it's still to this day it's a talking point for every. I have the map of the crime scene in my office.
Yeah.
The huge map that they drew up of the crime scene still in my office, and the detective that retired who had that office was like, "You can just throw that away," and I'm like, "There's no way I'm throwing that away."
It's a piece of history.
That's the biggest thing that happened in Craighead County law enforcement wise in a very long time. So.
Yeah, and that's all. The West Side shooting was always something that this community and the community around there will always, I feel, have some. We've got the Memorial Garden out there and all that stuff, and so when you were in the SRO position out there, and Reilly and I were both in school at that campus. Is that something that you and Ryan and the security team and all that stuff just always had on the forefront, and it's because it was West Side more so? Does that make sense?
I think Ryan had a bigger budget to play with because it was West Side, so he could do more things than some other schools could, and he put it to good use. I mean, he's very good at his job, I think, and he allowed me to concentrate on being a law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
And not worry so much about being a school employee, which it's kind of a double-edged thing, because you have to be you have to try to be close with the kids, because that's where you do the most good as far as if anything's going to happen, they're going to be the ones that know, and if they don't trust you and you're not close with them, you're not going to hear about it until after it happens. On the other hand, they have to know who you are. They have to know that you're there to be an authority figure, and that you're there to enforce the law if it comes to that. So you almost have two sets of bosses.
Yeah.
You have to keep the school happy, which is not hard. It was never hard for me to do, because if they asked me to do something, I just went and done it, unless it was just crazy, stupid,
Yeah.
And then you also have to keep the sheriff happy, which is school's happy and you're out of his sight and he don't hear about you. He's happy about it. So
Good. Yeah.
Both the sheriffs that I worked for have been really good in that sense. So, it's always on his mind. I know to this day.
Yeah.
He would get at least once a week send out an email to all staff and faculty. If this happened today, what would you do?
Yeah.
Just to try to keep them thinking about it, and it's hard to do that with people that don't think the way that we think as law enforcement officers.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I remember my senior year, I wasn't in the class that it happened, or the drill or training happened, but I know a friend of mine tackled you into a bookcase.
Yeah, absolutely. He was happy to do it too.
Yeah. Drew and he's a football guy. He's a center. Or was.
And it was really fun for them. It was fun for us, since I didn't get hurt. But it also, I think, it made a lot of them think of what could happen. Or we brought I think Ryan and I tried to bring a reality to it, even when we were training teachers, to get them to think. And when you go in and sit down and talk about that stuff, it stays with you until you leave the room.
Yeah.
But we would take, tried to take it to the next level when you're in a room and somebody comes in popping off a cap gun or an actual blank gun that sounds like gunshots, it resonates a little bit more with you. And of course, we had teachers too that were either there as a student when the shooting happened or there as a teacher. So you kind of have to be mindful of that too.
But like for me from a student's perspective, not just like the kid of a law enforcement officer, because like law enforcement like members like think differently anyway, right? Like you're like, I'm not, when we go to eat, like your back's not to the door, right? Like that's just a given, and any law enforcement family like knows that. It's just part of it. Yeah, and so for me, but as a student though, and I wasn't at Westside when it happened. I wasn't even like in school. I had just been born really, but I appreciated that real life, like realistic training for us, because it makes the difference, as opposed to just being told about it or whatever. You can tell somebody about it all day until you're put in a situation or a scenario, even if you know it's fake, like you just don't know. And that's something that I liked about like the Alice stuff that you guys were doing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it makes it real fast. I mean, you can see the looks in people's eyes. I taught a class in West Helena schools, and Gene Lane, another SRO at Westside, went with me to do that. And he was my role player, so he would always have the either the blank gun or the airsoft gun that we used back in those days.
Yeah,
we don't use them anymore. So we would they would try to predict a pattern, because we had so many people, we had to divide them into 3 classrooms.
Right.
And we would do them all at once. So we would go into one classroom, and then he would go into the next one, and then the next one, and have them react to it. Well, they would be all sitting around laughing. Well, we switched it up on them and started in a different order. And one of the ladies was like, "Well, you didn't tell me you were coming in here first." I said, "Well, we'll make sure that this criminal calls you and lets him know where he's going before he comes into your school." So, and it kind of opened some of their eyes, I think, to how fast something can happen.
Yeah.
And people don't understand, when you say, law enforcement may have a 3-minute response time from the first call, and I always tell them that's not going to get much better. That's fast. That's fast. Until you stand in front of them with a cap gun or a blank gun, until somebody start timing, and you just start popping it off at people. You can shoot everybody in the room in 3 minutes.
Yeah. I remember like you had done, I think it was one of the training exercises at Westside that like the SWAT team, like you guys were doing, or something like that, where you had like a bunch of balloons and bags and stuff. Yeah. And like you just, that was kind of the point, to like show the damage that can be done in 90 seconds. Or
yeah, we kind of stepped down our realism because some people just couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
It was almost too real.
Yeah. Could trigger.
So we stepped it down, and we started using balloons or trash bags that were aired up, and we'd show them how fast it could happen. And I always try to teach a situational awareness aspect to it. And if you hear something that's out of place, do you go check it out, or you just kind of blow it off like, well, maybe somebody's working next door, or maybe something. And that was a class that you're talking about, was with the parents that had come in, and it just some of them, it just really turned the light bulb on for them. They're like, just the other day there was a wreck out in front of the house, and I didn't think nothing about it. I was home eating lunch, and I just wanted to get my lunch finished and get back to work. Yeah. He said that could have been just as easily somebody out there shooting somebody. Yeah. And it could have been. But even as law enforcement people that have been in it for a while, you can come across a situation that will kind of almost freeze you. Yeah. And you and Reilly were involved in one of those moments for me at Westside when we were doing a class, and they switched my training officer. Yeah. At the time, switched it up and put
just to kind of like put the scenario what was happening. Like they were going through training, and Dad's like squad officer was putting them through like trying to clear the hallway. The shooter is in the hallway. That's all they knew. and like they go basically, right?
Yeah,
That was the situation.
Yeah, that was just it. We knew there was a shooter that could possibly be a student in the building, and of course we come down the hallway, and as always, from the time I started SWAT until the time I backed out being a sniper, I was usually on point. So I was the first one through the door every time.
Kicking doors.
And going down the hallway, and you run out.
Yeah.
And then Reilly runs out holding a gun.
Yeah.
So that kind of, it just catches you off guard. It's like, what do I do now?
Yeah. And the order was to down the shooter, because that's what you're supposed to do.
Stop the threat.
Yeah.
So, and even if it was another, I don't remember. She couldn't have been 10 or 11 years old. So
at the time,
had it been another little
12,
10 or 11-year-old girl, it would have had the same effect.
Yeah.
I think on any of us, it kind of shocks you. But 10 and 13 were the boys that done that at Westside.
Yeah.
So,
and it's funny. Well, it's not funny, but it's humorous to think about now, because back when I lived on campus at Arkansas State, we there was like a situation. It ended up being nothing. That one was there was someone that ended up actually having a situation later in that same year, I think. But this particular situation happened, and they classified it as an active shooter situation, and it wasn't. And so there was some miscommunication and stuff like that going on. But as being you being who you are, and people know that about me, like that you're my dad, I got calls and texts and group me messages from classmates like, hey, what's going on, what do we need to do, because they didn't know what do we do. And I'm
it's
dude,
hard
if this is happening to you, this is what you do. This
and it doesn't really get taught the way that I personally feel, and my views on this, that they water it down to me so much. They're because they want to they have other things they got to do, and they don't want to spend a lot of time on something that is just
they did after
after
that.
So and they changed the definition of active shooter so much, and they've changed it again not long ago to where it's not even a shots fired, which completely blows my mind. But there's no shots fired, but there's still have an active shooter on campus.
And it's it's words like definitions and stuff, and I feel like that people tend to almost take that into too much, worry too much about that instead of what's going on. And when you hear the words active shooter, I'm like, someone's getting shot. That's what that means to me. And at the time, that's what the definition was. And then there wasn't even a gun. Yeah. And so the whole community went into a frenzy, and they learned from it, I think, and they did training on it after the fact. But unfortunately, that tends to be the book is that something happens and then you train on it, but someone's died.
We have a lot of good people now that are doing our trainings for that do some for churches and different businesses. I did for a while some businesses myself, but the time is just not. I just don't have the time, because there's four of us that four
Only.
detectives that and when somebody's gone, it just makes everybody else their job a little tougher. So we try not to do that. And when there's other people that can do it, and I know they can do it just as well. So
and I think that comes from because Reilly and I both know that Reilly and I are very different people, but I think a lot of the stuff we think the same and that kind of stuff. And those particular things come from just the way that we were raised, and how what's expected of us in all of these situations, because you and Mom both were really real. And so being in law enforcement and that kind of thing, kind of transitioning into something that doesn't involve school shootings, really, I guess, that how did being in law enforcement and being the SRO shape, or that was my ankle, shape or change the way that you parented?
Being an SRO, I think, changed a lot of things that I did, because it was just seeing. I knew nothing about how school worked to start with when I went into work for them, and I learned so much about the people and the not just the teachers, the staff, everybody from the superintendent down to the custodial crews, and just how much they put into each child in that school was just incredible. That and that was from, they would put that into each child from the straight A honor student or the star quarterback on the football team,
right,
or to the kid that couldn't afford to pay his lunch bill. All of that was, they didn't go, there were no preconceived notions about anybody that came into that school student wise. They took care of them the same. I seen a lot of things, that kind of changed the way that I dealt with people.
Yeah.
It changed a lot about my thoughts on some of the kids and the way they were treated, because most of the time the only positive moment they had during the day happened on campus.
Right.
And they didn't have a lot to go home to. So that's where, I might have seen a lot of that when I was a kid in school when I was younger, but it didn't resonate with me the way it did, because I didn't see the teacher side of it. I didn't see the adult side of it that was trying to take care of that. So, and that, I think, maybe helped me maybe be more vocal about how you kids treated other kids.
Yeah.
Because a lot of kids don't treat those people the same. And by the same token, they may not treat the quarterback or the track star or or the stud basketball player sometimes with as much respect as they do, the
academic or whatever
side of it.
And I think for me, and it's that had a lot to do with like how my friend group ended up. Like Westside in general is a fairly accepting, friendly place to be. Obviously, every school has their issues or whatever, but like when you look at like my friend group, it encompassed like all of those things.
Yeah, very
like,
diverse.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this to somebody here just in the last week about seeing the big story about Michael Carr and how well he's done.
And he will be an Olympic pole vaulter, by the way. Like that's going to happen.
About you guys were really close, really young, and then normally how I seen things work was when one person goes into athletics, the other person goes into either to another fine arts program or to academics heavily. Their friendship kind of splits, and they don't stay friends that way. But you guys stayed close all through school, regardless of he would be the first one to cheer you on as a drum major, as hard as you would cheer him on as a pole vaulter or as a running back, or and so that was very impressive on both of your parts. So.
And that's something that came, I would say, directly from that kind of like you said, being more vocal about that stuff, because I mean I've got from that group, you've got Michael, who's an extreme athlete. He safe to say an Olympic athlete at some point in his career. You've got Zach, who is now in Disney World, being a character down there, and I think he should be starting this week or next doing that. I've got friends who are going into business. I've got friends who are getting master's or doctorate degrees or working on that, like all from that same friend group. And some that just lived the college experience, that enjoyed, that went into the fraternity or sorority and did those things, and all from the same, 2 dozen people that we all hung out with. And I think that's a parenting thing that helped, because like none of us didn't get along with anybody. Like we all, obviously, like we were in high school, drama happened sometimes, whatever, but we all dealt with it, and none of us like excluded anybody.
Yeah, I think with same goes with Reilly. We tried to, and with the age difference there, a lot of that doesn't just come from me; it comes from you too. From
7 years
from her way she treats people too. I comment a lot to everybody about how genuine she is most of the time. With if somebody does something really good, you can tell that she's just happy for that person.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I don't. That's just a big thing for her, is that she's like,
Yeah.
she's happy to see other people succeed, and like it's just cool for her. Now, I do too. I didn't mean to sound that way.
But from my experiences, teenage girls usually don't. They'll try to tear each other down more than they will build each other up, and I don't see that with her and her friends too. You know, they're the same way, and commented on people. You know, there was a girl last year that was on was it American Idol, that was just that way. You could tell that when somebody done something really good, she was just so happy.
It's so funny that you watch American Idol, by the way. Like, that's hilarious.
I didn't watch it for years, but because of course I went to the police academy with somebody that would look just like the guy. What was Ken, the shebang guy from the first?
The guy, the shebang.
So
Ken,
still talk to him occasionally. He's wasn't actually him, but looked just like him. So.
Might as well have been. I'd start telling people it was him. Much more. Yeah. It's much funnier that way. Wrote a song about that.
Yeah, wrote a song about it. Want to hear it?
Well, here it go. And so stuff like that, I was always really appreciative of, and everything from that to, I guess, do math. I get 5. Well, I graduated 4 years ago this May, so I guess 5 or 6 years ago, not 4 or 5, 5 or 6 years ago, like you gave me a book, Rich Dad Poor Dad from Robert Kiyosaki, and it's just little stuff like that. You're like, hey, read this book. I was like, okay. I read the book, and so Cody actually has that book now. And so it's like passing it on. And
so I listened to your first podcast with Cody.
Yeah.
I can't think of his last name.
Cody Pate,
and what he's got going on, just kind of with the teaching tech thing, you know. I was talking to some of the guys at work because they're all mostly about my age.
Yeah.
And I tried for a long time to keep up with tech.
Yeah.
Tried and I just can't.
You keep up way better than most.
A lot of things that I just can't do. I use my phone for a phone and a text on it, and maybe I do a little bit of internet or Facebook or something on it, but that's about it. I don't, I don't use like voice calling. I don't use a lot of that stuff. Yeah. I know it's all in there because that phone, as I've told you many times, I think you've heard the computer story. Shortly after you were born, I moved to Memphis, and I'd never owned a home computer.
Yeah.
And went to Sears because that was the place, in Memphis at the time. This was in 97 or 98.
Yeah.
And bought a computer. I went in.
I keep forgetting, by the way, that Sears used to be the place.
Yeah,
because they went out here.
Appliances, electronics, and it was the big store in Memphis. So I go over there, and the salesman was like, "Man, this is top of the line. You will never outgrow this computer, this tower system." And I'm like, "All right, man, that's probably what I need." And he's like, "You can put anything, all your files on this thing. You can use it for." At the time, it was just the beginning of the internet craze, anyways.
Right after Al Gore invented the internet.
Yeah. So I think really the whole World Wide Web thing started in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So it hadn't been out, a whole long time, and we lived in Brooklyn, Arkansas, so it hadn't filtered that far down.
At the time, yeah.
The guy sold me a computer tower, 3 gig.
Yeah. And you could store stuff on it forever.
That was it. That was the bomb, dude. You would never outgrow that in your lifetime. Now, I don't know if he just thought I was going to die soon or what. But, I think, my phone is probably, I don't know, mine's a work phone, but it's probably 64 gig at the least, and I carry it in my pocket. So I use it as a phone and a text machine and an email machine, basically.
Yeah.
But it's just crazy the way that has just exploded in your lifetime, not my lifetime, but.
And Cody and I talked about that quite a bit too, about the explosion of the internet and computers and what it's become and all that stuff, and your generation had to raise kids that didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
And For me, I got my first cell phone at 9 years old, and it was a Motorola Razr. And by the way, still the best phone I've ever had. And
still got one.
Yeah, it's awesome. And not the Crazer, the other one. And like how, because like you get your parenting skills or you know how you're going to parent your kids from your parents essentially and how you were raised.
Yeah.
And like this is new territory. You know how did like you handle that?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, you know, my parents back in the days when I was growing up, a lot of the parents was just a one income family.
Dad worked, mom stayed home.
So a lot of the time, my mom didn't work. You know, there were 4 of us kids. That was probably about as full-time job as I could imagine.
Yeah.
So she stayed home.
I know the other 3 kids, and I know that was a full-time job.
And when she did go to work, when we got to Arkansas, which we moved here in 71, 72, you know, I would go to work with her because I was the only one left at home. Everybody else was in school. Yeah. So I'd go spend the day at work with her. There was no daycares. There would, you know, ship us off anywhere. But my dad worked as a, you know, he was a truck driver for a long time. And he was just gone a lot. He was, not that he would be home most weekends. Yeah. But the dude had a work ethic like nobody I'd ever met. Yeah. The only thing that comes close to him right now is your Uncle Rodney. I mean,
Uncle Rodney works himself.
I think I've got a pretty good work ethic, in that I go to work every day. I don't call in sick. Yeah. There are days, you know, to this day that I work 13 or 14 hours a day, a couple of days a week. But
and
that's the way I was raised.
Funny too, because I mean, I did the same thing. Like this past weekend, I did 3 14-hour days.
Yeah. Yeah. But then, to come into this technology stage, like you said, I grew up without a computer until I was 30 years old. Yeah. The first cell phone I had was attached to my truck. I guess you called it a cell phone, a mobile phone, and it was when Alltel came to Jonesboro. You know, I took my truck out there, and I worked construction at the time, so they bolted me one in. Well, you couldn't take it with you across the yard behind the house, so. You had to stay in touch with your clients. But you know, somebody called in, you know, needing something done, so they set it where the horn would honk when the phone rang. But it was top of the line. It was.
What'd your buddies say when like that happened? Like when you got it done?
They thought it was the greatest thing ever. Like we'd be going to town or something, have a buddy in the truck, and they would be like, "Man, can I use that phone?" They'd be calling their mom or something like, "I'm in David Vaughn's truck talking on the phone." But, you know, we went from that to the bag phones and then the flip phones, and it moved so quickly. It got to where probably through my 30s maybe, the phones were getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
I remember you had
the smaller your phone was, the cooler you were.
Yeah.
You know, so, and now it's kind of the trend is going in the opposite direction.
Yeah. You had a phone that was like the size of like a $50 or
I've
something.
Got it. It's a Pantech. And I've still got it somewhere. I've seen it when I come across that game thing that I was talking about. That.
Yeah. The thing was so cool.
Yeah. But, you know, from the time, I guess we moved back to Jonesboro.
From Memphis?
From Memphis. Because it was just too rough to raise kids over there. Yeah. When we signed you up for preschool, basically at Discovery Island, I think you were 3 years old, and we went in and they taught a computer program for 3 or 4 year olds, and they had a computer sitting over, and the lady was explaining it to us, and you went over and signed on to the internet. She's like, "Well, I guess I need to explain any more to you." But you know, and you grew up through that, and you've seen all the innovations through all of the technology. Is just crazy. Me, I stayed at work a lot. Whether it was construction or in law enforcement, I always had a second job to go to make sure that everything was paid and that you guys had what you needed. You might not have had a lot of extra, but
we had plenty extra. Cody and I talked quite a bit about that too. Like, and it pretty. I can't imagine that Reilly and I ever have wanted for anything. You know, I mean, my first car was like phenomenal. You know, like it was well, the one after I wrecked the first one. Yeah. That one doesn't count. the truck that I got for my 16th though was and it doesn't exist otherwise.
No.
It was, an Allison transmission, a Cummins diesel engine, and a Chevy body with a half ton. And it had a train horn in it that you took out for a good reason.
Yes.
And an amazing sound system. And it was amazing. That was, we never, I got the Xbox for Christmas. I got the, and it never have Reilly or I either, ever needed anything.
Well, technology was usually first on the list.
It was on my list.
And luckily, we were able to do that because, that's just, you can't survive without it now.
Yeah.
I mean,
my work is done on my cell phone.
Yeah.
I
don't know. I remember the days growing up that, you had to, you just didn't know where anybody was at. If you got home by the lights on. If you got home and your parents weren't home, you just didn't know where they were at because you didn't know where to get a hold of them.
Yeah.
I remember Brad, our oldest brother, coming home and parents were gone and they left him a note, said, "We're not home, call us when you get here." Well, that's the days before cell phones, so it was a big joke with my dad to do that.
This is also the same guy, by the way, that would regularly pull into a McDonald's drive-thru and order a Whopper.
Yeah.
That's that guy. Which I can't imagine where you or I get our sense of humor. So.
No, you just had to know. He also the guy that laid underneath the camper in the yard for 2 or 3 hours waiting for Mom to come out so he could grab her leg and steer her.
Worked every time.
Mm-hmm.
That's so funny. Reilly, Reilly and I have been very fortunate in growing up in those kinds of things too. We never had to worry about where we were going to sleep. We both knew that we were always loved. We both knew that, at the end of the day, if we needed anything, we could get it, if it was a true thing that needed to happen. And, the more, the older that I get and the more people that I meet, because I know a lot of people, and you get introduced to a lot of people regularly, not everybody has that, and you learn that as you get older, that not everybody had the opportunity and, the basic stuff that you can't imagine without, the fact that there are people out there where both of their parents don't love them, genuinely, and that's terrible and that's awful, but it's the truth, and so Reilly and I both have, and we've talked and we hang out more now that we're both a little bit older because our age difference was so big.
Yeah.
But we're both very thankful for that.
The difference now, I think, as far as people that grew up without things, you probably grew up with people that didn't have computers or couldn't get access to the internet or things like that. I grew up with a kid that didn't have running water.
Yeah, that's the difference.
That had to carry water from the neighbor's house to his house, as a kid, had to do that because the parents either couldn't afford it, wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So the kids had to do that to be able to take a bath. And I can tell you, this kid walked to school. He went to every basketball game we had, rode the bus with us. He would walk to that, and if it wasn't for people like my dad and some of the other dads, he would have had to walk home after dark from the school. So that's just a little different perspective on doing without.
Yeah.
We think of doing without. And I grew up with, I had 2 loving parents, and that he would give us his last dollar and we'd never known it.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky as well as a child.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's that's come through, I think, too, because you and Mom were both that way too. If Reilly and I both had we when she was in school and I was super involved, so I had a bunch of people around me all the time, and most of the time I was in some sort of leadership role or whatever, and so I had in my mind at the time that was a super huge deal, and I had people to take care of and that kind of thing and make sure that they were okay before I was and all that stuff. And you and Mom both, anytime something like that would happen where a kid doesn't have a ride or a kid would have to walk home or even if they just have to instead of waiting 20 minutes longer, we'll just ride with us, we'll go home, even if it wasn't someone that we were close to, and so it and I think that, well, I know that will, continue.
Yeah.
You know.
And you don't know how that affects people until, people are watching.
Yeah.
Even, I've been a police officer for so long that I just expect wherever I'm at, people are watching it. In my mind, a lot of times they're watching for me to make a mistake.
Yeah. Well, now more so than ever, I think.
But, I was walking through Walmart one day off duty, and the kid in front of me in the stroller dropped something, a shoe or something, and I just stopped and picked it up and handed it back to the parents. And a girl that I grew up with was behind me and said, "I can't believe you just done that, and you're not even uniformed."
Yeah.
That uniform doesn't define who I am. You still want to be a good person, and that's what you got to try to instill in everybody that you meet. That you are a good person, and then no matter the circumstances, right is right and wrong is wrong.
Right.
So you just got to do the right thing.
Yeah, it's one of those like a person's character is defined by what they do when no one's looking.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we've always been told, and it's true. Like exactly like what you said, right is right and wrong is wrong.
Well, just Brad, my oldest brother, told me one time that the judgment of whether or not you're doing right is not what your kid acts like when you're around; it's what he acts like when you're not around.
Right.
So, I've not had any negative feedback on that, so I guess I did okay.
Yeah. Doing all right. I'm okay. I'm all right. Reilly's terrible.
Yeah.
But, no, we do okay. I think we like I said, I think a lot of it, and I talked about this guy in the episode with Cody too, but I know that you have listened to like some Gary Vaynerchuk stuff at some point too, just if I sent it to you or whatever. And like his biggest thing, like he breathes and dies by like gratitude. Yeah. And I think for me and Reilly, and it should be for everybody, that like if you're not doing it for yourself, just do it for like being good, like being a good person. Like do it out of the gratitude of like your parents raised you well, or appreciate what they've done for you, or appreciate what society or certain people have done for you, and do it that way. Do it for them or whatever, and just be grateful. And it's so I do not feel that you will ever have to like worry about what your kids are doing when you're not around, kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't worry about that a lot these days. I think that you guys understand that everything comes around, and you see these days social media is just is really biting people bad. For as people are losing their jobs and losing their ability to support their family over something they did on social media 10 years ago.
Yeah, Twitter, real bad about it. Yeah.
And so you have to realize, and I deal with it in law enforcement a lot, mostly with kids, but with some adults too, that once you hit that send button, no matter what platform you're on, that don't go away. Ever. You may delete it off of your page or your Twitter page or Facebook or any of them. I know there's 1,000 of them that it's still there because I find it every day in my job from someone that has no clue that it's still there. And it could be anything from liking the wrong meme or the wrong person's page or whatever. It's just crazy that it's changed. It's changed the way we do things. It's changed the law enforcement world and just the political world, and just in general. It's you never think about something that when you were 18 is going to come back to haunt you when you're 40.
Right.
But that stuff's keeping kids from getting recruited to colleges for athletics. It's stopping people from getting into good schools like Harvard or Yale or something, because they research that stuff, and they have the means to find it, where maybe your average person, just like me as a citizen, until I was involved in it on the investigative side, I had no idea that you could find all that stuff, and it's not hard to do. For anyone with the means to do it, especially with the resources to do that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, we are approaching up on our hour.
Awesome.
So that was a great talk.
Good talk.
As we go into the end, from a parenting standpoint, if you were to give like a piece of advice to the people listening, say my age, who are either fresh parents or going to be parents soon, that kind of thing, what would you leave on this Father's Day?
Just that your, the most precious thing that you can give to a child is your time. And that kind of contradicts where I came from earlier about working all the time and providing. But just be there at the events, and I don't mean just when you've got a star athlete, but be there, for that. Whether it's softball, basketball, football, volleyball, be there for quiz bowl, band. Just go be there for your children and just be by their side. Take them out. Get them outside.
Yeah.
Get them away from the electronics sometimes and let them kind of decompress and get away from that. Show them what nature's about. And while you're out there, pick up some litter. Do something good.
Yeah.
Be a good person. Teach them to be a good person by being a good person yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's it, guys. That is episode 2 of The Vaughn Show in the books. 1 hour later with my dad, David Vaughn. I appreciate you being here very much. Thanks for coming. Guys, do not remember to like and subscribe. Leave a comment on the video what you guys want to hear us talk about in future episodes. Somewhere on your screen, if you're watching on YouTube, there will be a link to previous episodes to be able to subscribe to the channel, things like that. And if you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher or any of the other podcasting services, please do not forget to subscribe, download the episodes. That way you have them on the go. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. Bye.